Hello everyone, I'm Don McDermott. I'm a boat builder based in the UK on the beautiful River Thames, and I'm about to embark on a journey to build a rather incredible historic class wooden sailing vessel, a 59-foot clinker-planked trading wherry. This is the first video in the series, and you'll be able to watch every step of the process as I create the first trading wherry since the Ella was launched in 1912, a small matter of, at current date, 112 years. In their heyday, there were over 300 of these cargo-carrying sailing craft, almost exclusively based on the Norfolk Broads, although some went further afield to the Thames and the Solent. Nowadays, there are only 2 trading wherries remaining, along with 3 pleasure wherries and 3 wherry yachts. No wherry has carried cargo since the Albion, who is one of the wherries that still survives, last carried cargo in 1972, and she was very much an outlying case, as all other wherries had ceased trading before the Second World War. But all that is about to change. My wherry, to be called Lady Garnet, and I'll tell you more about her name in a minute, will be able to carry roughly 15 tons of cargo, and I intend to use her as part of the ever-growing sail cargo movement. There are quite a few larger sailing vessels that can carry cargo across the North Sea and Atlantic, but there is a vital link which is missing, and that is sailing vessels that have a shallow enough draft to be able to carry cargo on inland waterways. Now, there are so many exciting things to talk about that I scarcely know where to begin, but I think I'll start by giving you a little bit more history of the trading wherry. They've been around since the 1600s, where they were the descendant, rival, and eventual cause of the demise of the earlier cargo vessel, the Norfolk Keel, which in turn is assumed to have evolved from the Viking longship, with possibly a Roman influence as well. Now, the Keel was a big, heavy boat. They could carry a lot of cargo, but they were very slow and difficult to maneuver. Whereas the wherries, at the early stages, were much smaller but much quicker. However, they could only carry about 8 tons of cargo, or roughly 8,000 kilograms. As time went by, though, the wherries increased in size. By the time we get to the 1800s, when the wherries were at their peak and the keels had just disappeared completely from the Broads, wherries, on average, could carry about 20 tons of cargo. However, of course, as I say, that was just an average. There were some that were much larger. In fact, the largest wherry ever built, called, somewhat appropriately, the Wonder, could carry 90 tons of cargo, which really put her on a level of a smaller Thames barge. Now, I could go on and tell you a lot more about the history of wherries because I am rather obsessed with them, but I think you'll want to hear more details about Lady Garnet now. However, I will be dropping bits of trivia and history about wherries into future videos, and if you're really interested in them, I can highly recommend 2 terrific books on the subject, Roy Clark's Black Sail Traders and Robert Malster's Wherries and Waterways. So about Lady Garnet. Now, there are 2 questions that you're probably going to want to ask. The first is, what exactly is she going to look like? What are her dimensions going to be? And the other question is, why a wherry? Now, that question I'm going to address in the second video of this series, but for right now, let's take a look at her dimensions. So I'm basing the plans for Lady Garnet off the plans for Albion. Now, to be honest, it's not easy to find plans for a trading wherry because they were all originally built by eye. So the lines plans for Albion and also for Gleaner are the only 2 that are known to exist, and they were both drawn after the fact. But of course, all wherries are very similar. So, as I said, I will be using the plans for Albion as a guide, but also using the plans for Gleaner to make some adjustments to those plans. So, at the end of the day, Lady Garnet will be, in fact, her own design. Of course, even if I followed Albion's plans exactly, Lady Garnet would still be quite different from Albion, because Albion is carvel-planked, which means she has a smooth hull, whereas Lady Garnet is going to be clinker-planked, and that means that her planks will overlap with each other. And I will mention now, for my American listeners, I'm saying clinker planking. That is the British terminology. In the US, this is called lapstrake. So clinker construction was historically how wherries were built, and in fact, Albion is, as far as we know, the only trading wherry who is built with carvel construction. Why she was built this way is sometimes a matter of debate, and I'm sure I will mention this in a later video. So here's another look at my mock-up of how Lady Garnet will look. You will notice the hull and sail are black, which is very striking and is traditional. Wherries worked all year round, and the sails would stay wet for long periods of times in the winter. So to prevent rotting, they were treated with a mixture of tar and fish oil, which gave them a black color. Now, I won't be using that exact mixture, of course, but her sail will be black. This marks her as a trading wherry as opposed to a pleasure wherry. So pleasure wherries were a later innovation in the latter stages of the 1800s and carried passengers rather than cargo. That was good weather work, and so the sail wouldn't need to be treated, and anyway, there was a risk of Edwardian fancy clothing coming up against tar and fish oil, so pleasure wherries had plain white sails. There are 3 pleasure wherries that are still sailing today. There is Solus, which is privately owned, and Hartor and Ardea, which are run by the Wherry Yacht Charter Charitable Trust, who also own the 3 wherry yachts. Now, the yachts were even further from the traditional trading wherries, being carvel planked with white hulls and a counterstern rather than being double-ended. But I've gone off on a tangent again. I was talking about Lady Garnet's dimensions. So she's going to be 59 feet long, or 65 feet if you include the rudder. Her width, or beam as we boat builders call it, will be 15 feet, and her draft, which is how much of her is below the waterline, well, that depends on how much cargo she is carrying, but it will be between roughly 3 feet and 4.5 feet. So you can see from that how she is ideally suited for river and estuary sailing with such a shallow draft. Now, you may notice that I talk in feet and inches. Now, there are 2 reasons for this. The first is that although I am now British, I am originally from the United States, that's where I went to school, and the United States still uses imperial measurements, so I just grew up using feet and inches. I then moved over to the UK, and I never really saw much of a reason to change. And then I went to boat building college at the International Boat Building Training College in Lowestoft in Suffolk. And the thing about boat building is it's quite a traditional craft, and so a lot of the people who were instructing us were obviously old-time boat builders who had been building boats for many, many decades, and of course they had grown up using imperial. They did, however, obviously understanding that there were a lot of young people coming into the industry, that the metric system is now what is currently being used. So there was sort of a mix at the college, and what's basically happened, and there's quite a lot of boat builders who do this, is that I use feet and inches for larger measurements, and then for really small measurements I will use millimeters. However, because I am aware that YouTube is a global site and I have viewers from a lot of countries, what I will do is when I give a measurement in whatever system I'm using, metric or imperial, I will put up, as I have just done, a handy little conversion at the bottom of the video. So back to Lady Garnet, I will tell you more about her in future videos, but there is one more detail that I did promise that I would mention, which is why Lady Garnet? What is behind the name? So this goes back quite a long way. It goes back to when I first lived in the UK, and I was 7 years old, and I read Arthur Ransom's famous novel, Swallows and Amazons. Now, if you haven't read it, it's a British book which turned into a 12-book series about a group of children who are very keen on sailing, exploring, and all sorts of fun outdoorsy things. Now, the series got me into birdwatching when I was quite young, and then after far, far too long of a time, I finally got into sailing. And it was through sailing that I discovered my love of wooden boats. And not just sailing them, but also the idea of working on them. And that idea very quickly turned into me going to boat building college, and I now work at a boatyard as a wooden boat builder on the Thames in Windsor. So it's safe to say that Arthur Ransom's books have had quite an important impact on my life. 2 of the books in the series are set on the Norfolk Broads, and there is a fictional trading wherry that appears in both books named Sir Garnet. So I decided that as an homage to Arthur Ransom, I would give my wherry a similar name, and since boats are always traditionally called she, I thought it would make sense just to simply change it to Lady Garnet. And then, while I was still debating the name, because there were others on the shortlist, I discovered that there actually were 2 existing wherries back in the day called Garnet. And in fact, when I did more research, I found that there are lots of wherries that were named after gemstones or colors. So, for example, there were 3 called Pearl, 2 named Ruby, and also Amethyst, Crystal, Diamond, Emerald, and Gem. There's also a wherry yacht called Lady Edith, now called Narada, and another named Lady Violet. So quite simply, Lady Garnet is a splendid traditional style name for a wherry, and I think that having garnet painted hatches in contrast with the black sail and the black hull and the varnished mahogany cabin sides, or standing and shifting right-ups, as the wherrymen would call them, will produce a very striking effect. So when does the actual boat building start, you ask? Well, right now I am fundraising for the project, and you can see the fundraising link in the description below the video. But I'm hoping to start work later in the summer this year. Ideally, I'm aiming for August. Now, this is a huge project and it's one I'm very committed to, but if you can help in any way, if not with an actual contribution to the fundraiser, then just with a like and subscribe and a share. Sharing is crucial to get the videos out to as many people as possible, so if you can tell your friends and your family, your rich uncle who always wanted to be a pirate, random strangers you meet on the street, anybody, everybody, it would really help me, and I thank you so much in advance for that. Anyway, I do hope that you stick around to follow this adventure, and while we're waiting for the actual build to start, there are other videos on my channel. You can watch my current project, which is a small dinghy that I can now reveal, especially for those who have already been following the build, is going to be the dinghy for Lady Garnet, of course. I am also, as mentioned, a keen sailor, and so there will be sailing videos from time to time. In fact, this weekend is my sailing club's regatta, and next weekend is the exciting 50-mile Three Rivers race on the Norfolk Broads, and hopefully I will get some videos of those exciting races and put them up. I will also be uploading more wherry videos in which I give you more information on Lady Garnet, more fun historical facts about wherries, and also, as I mentioned, I will be using the lines plans for Albion combined with Gleaner, so I will be doing some work on the plans, making up a table of offsets, which will enable me to draw the boat out full size in a process that we call lofting. So there was a lot to come. I do hope that you stay around for the whole process. It's going to be very exciting. Please do subscribe, like, and as I said before, please do share to everyone that you can. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.